Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a privilege to participate in TiEcon 2016. This is my first visit to TiEcon 2016, and I don't have words to express the kind of setting which is available, the kind of opportunities which is being provided to the participants in TiEcon. And let me first wish all the best to TiEcon for all its future endeavors. Today on the panel, we have two very distinguished guests. Let me first introduce to you the guests. The first guest is Mr. J.M. Norona. He is the chairman of the Goa Public Service Commission. He's a mechanical engineer. He's a mechanical engineer and holds a master's degree in industrial engineering. He's also trained in business incubation at University of Texas, Austin. He has held various positions in the state government and the government of India. He was earlier chairperson of the State Pollution Control Board also. Our next guest on the panel today is Mr. Phil Shaw. He's the Chief Executive India of Lockheed Martin India Private Limited. And I would invite both the panelists on the dais. To set the context, I think everybody has heard of the Make in India campaign, which is going on, which has been started, which has brought India into a global focus. And let me tell you, Make in India is not merely a slogan. It is not only branding of India, but Make in India has lots more than a slogan and branding of India. It has created a business-friendly environment within the country. It has created a attraction for the outside investors. It has created a competitive spirit between the different states of India, and all these states are vying with each other for attracting investments into their own state. They are working on improving the ease of doing business in their respective states. Apart from improving the environment, business-friendly environment, building up a business-friendly environment, the policies are being calibrated to meet the objectives of Make in India. And that is where defense sector is one of the most exciting sector as on today. The policies in the defense sector has been calibrated to meet the objectives of the Make in India policy which government is following. As you would be knowing, the new defense procurement policy has been announced. As the Secretary General of FICCI was saying, now with the new policy, with the new offset policy, there is almost 250 billion Indian rupees business to be made in India in next 7 to 8 years. The FDI policy has been calibrated, has been fine-tuned to meet the objectives. The exchange rate variation protection has been allowed in this particular sector. A level playing field has been introduced for the private and the public sector, and so on and so forth. Lot of policy calibrations have been done. Let's hear from the panelists who are present here. With this, I would request Mr. J.M. Norona to give his talk.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, a very good morning to all of you. There were 2-3 key issues that we discussed before I came in here. The first one was whether India is skill prepared to take on this whole mechanism of defense production and manufacturing. I'll just throw a few statistics to you now that we have about 470 million people on our workforce. And like Dr. Singh just said, we have 14% of GDP that comes from agriculture, where there are almost 55% of the people who work there. If you want to reskill them and bring them into the manufacturing, for example, the skilling process is a long drawn process. And from the survey done very recently, of 100,000 people that are skill trained in India, only 30% are really employable. So we have this large problem on hand. And like you have a model, for example, in the US and in Canada, the community college systems that train people in skills, in different skills required mainly for manufacturing, I would think that would be one of the key areas that India has to work on now, so that in the next 2 or 3 years, we are skill ready to really do the manufacturing the way that we want take it up from the present 20 to maybe 30% of our GDP. That is one key concern. The other concern that we discussed about is regarding what are the difficulties that maybe startups would have if they come into India, especially in the defense area. Now, I know for sure, because I have worked with startups for some time, set up 2 incubation centers in India as well, that the whole ecosystem perhaps for defense is very difficult to set up exclusively for defense manufacture, defense innovation. I would have thought, or as an idea, is that the DRDO opens up its labs, its innovation facilities to youngsters who come in, who are startups registered as a legal entity, allow them to work with them on a particular basis, how they exchange the MOU along with them, and that perhaps will give them a nice foothold into this defense innovation area. The third point we discussed on is what are the difficulties they would have. You know, I was at a function just last month when the Honorable Defense Minister was inaugurating one of the innovation centers, and he said to the people who were there that when he first went to his defense office in Delhi, there was a board outside his office which said, "Respect everyone, trust no one." So he said, you know, it was very strange that he had to read that. So he said he brought that board down. He took it off because he believed that you don't only respect everybody, you trust everybody. So I think he has in mind that he opens up his defense to startups. He wants people to understand what defense is about, come in, innovate, and help make in India. Thank you.
For the defense manufacturing sector, it is going to be a challenge because we need a different kind of a skill set for the workers, for the people who would be employed in these industries. And as you rightly pointed out, there may be a need to open up not only DRDO but other laboratories also to our young entrepreneurs, to young startups, so that they can use this facility to develop their startups in these facilities. Now I would request Mr. Phil Shaw, who is a specialist in this sector and has been working in this sector for quite long. As a CEO of Lockheed India, I would request him to deliver to give his talks.
Sure, thanks very much. Yeah, Lockheed has been involved in, there's lots of talk about, you know, is there a skilled workforce available for aerospace and defense in India? But Lockheed Martin has been established in India now for about 25 years. And in the last about 10 years, we've been involved in setting up and manufacturing in India for some of our products. So really ahead of the whole Make in India drive, we established 2 joint ventures actually, one to manufacture helicopter cabins in Hyderabad with Tata Advanced Systems, and another one to manufacture very large aerostructures for our C-130J transport aircraft. They are both exclusive suppliers to both Sikorsky for the helicopters and Lockheed for the C-130J in Hyderabad. Somebody asked about quality. The quality that we have got out of those plants is outstanding. It's as good as anything we've ever received before. And the schedule, these guys were doing this thing for the first time. They've always beaten the schedule and had stuff ahead of time. So our experience in India over the last 7 or 8 years now of manufacturing stuff has been very positive. And, we didn't arrive with a bunch of aerostructure engineers on our hands. Most of these guys have a basic education either from university or college, have come to join us, and they've been skilled on site through apprenticeship or on-the-job training for a year or however long it takes to get them up to the levels of skill that we want. To an extent, or to some extent, that's a benefit for us because these guys, the average age of the workforce is about 24. Obviously, in the more developed countries, the workforce is aging. This is a very young workforce. They're going to be around providing this, remain interested in the sector for decades to come. So that's a huge advantage to us, we think, in working in India. So our initial experience has been very positive, and I agree, you've mentioned some of the changes with policy, over the last few years, with ease of doing business over the last few years, has been really encouraging. It's still a challenge, as Dr. Singh indicated, but those challenges are reducing over time. And the other positive thing, I'd say, over the last 18 months or so, has been a willingness to engage foreign OEMs such as ourselves and foreign companies such as ourselves to be a part of the dialogue, to explain what the issues are, working in India as a foreign company, and to actually look at those and take them into consideration as they address policy change. So it's a really positive, I'd say, environment today. FDI has opened up in defense to 49% as well, and so on. So I think, by and large, I think the experience is positive. I think the policy changes are positive. There's been a recent change to the defense procurement process. There are still some sections of that to be issued. Offset was mentioned by Dr. Singh. Offset obligations around the world are a challenge to all of us. And that's no different in India, but that policy is under review, as is the policy to introduce strategic partners in India. But the biggest change, I think, is the real desire to get indigenous content into defense manufacturing. And so they've introduced a new category this year called IDDM, India Designed and Developed and Manufactured, which is really aimed at trying to indigenize a lot of the kind of defense industrial base. And companies like ours are very willing to be a part of that process, to co-produce platforms, as we are doing now with Tata Advanced Systems, to look at much bigger systems in the future, subject to kind of central government decision making, obviously. But we're very willing to engage and do that. So I would think the environment is changing, and it's changing for the better.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. As you mentioned, a lot of changes have already taken place. In fact, I think last month we were in Israel and UK looking at the defense sector. There also we found a lot of excitement as far as the defense sector is concerned. And it is generally being perceived as a game-changing policy, whatever government of India has introduced in recent times. How do you see the Indian defense growth story taking shape in future, in the times to come, with the changes in the policy which has already been undertaken by the government and which might be undertaken in the times to come?
Yeah, well, as I say, they've introduced this new category, IDDM, to try and bring more indigenous companies into right through the life cycle, if you like, of a product. So design, develop, manufacture, and then support. But I think there's a recognition that's not all going to happen on day one. There's going to have to be a lot of collaboration with companies like ours, with much smaller companies than ours as well, and even startup companies, I think, across the ecosystem in defense, in order for that to be a success. So whilst they have introduced this new category, and it's the preferred category for them in procurement, there's a recognition that on day one that's not going to be possible, and it's going to take some time to get there. So I think in the future we're looking at a lot more of what we really have already done in Lockheed. That's to partner with a local company to co-produce in India, to build up skill sets and capability, and then slowly an indigenous capability will be built within the private sector. Some of that is there already in the public sector, but it's really to build up the private sector base where we can really help.
Since we are sitting in Silicon Valley, what opportunities do you see for the startups, in particularly in this sector? And how can we relate it to the entrepreneurs who are located in the Silicon Valley? How can they become a partner in this emerging defense growth story in India?
Yeah, well, I think, we actually run an innovation program in India called the India Innovation and Growth Program, along with FICCI and along with the Department of Science and Technology, really to encourage innovation and startups. And we're in our 10th year of that program at the moment. And also TiE is part of that organization as well. They partnered with us a couple of years ago to try and make this connection with Silicon Valley. We bring some of the innovators across from India, about 10 of them every year as part of this program, to introduce them to the Silicon Valley kind of ecosystem, to introduce them to similar sized companies and larger kind of companies here in the Valley in order to engender a much more collaboration between those kind of communities. So I think in the defense sector in particular, that's an area that we're going to certainly be concentrating on, I think, as we look into the future. Before, this program has been kind of broad-based, and I think, we're keen to see maybe a little bit more focus on security and defense in this particular area. So I think there is a lot of collaboration to be had in aerospace, defense, and in fact any sector you can name in India.
Since I represent the state government of Orissa, I would also like to ask Mr. Shaw as to what opportunities do you see for these defense manufacturing companies, particularly in the eastern part of India, particularly in Orissa, because we already have a lot of establishments there. We have the Hindustan Aeronautics Limited in Koraput, which is into manufacturing and repair maintenance of engines. We have the integrated test range at Chandipur, which is one of the busiest test ranges in the entire world. And we have the Proof and Experimental Establishment Center of DRDO located again in Chandipur. And let me inform you also that under this, as a part of this Make in India campaign, a company called Maggot Defense System has already set up their base in Gopalpur in the SEZ of Tata. So looking at all these things, and we have, of course, we have Gopalpur, we have the Army AD College, Air Defense College, which is again into large amount of test firing. And Maggot is basically, as you would be knowing, is into manufacturing of targets. So how do you look at the eastern part of India emerging in this growth story?
I think over time, all parts of India will be involved. I think, we have started in Hyderabad because that's where our partner and we selected a few years ago, but that's really just scratching the surface of what can be done in India. I mean, we're actively looking at all the states, including the East, for future investment. And the investment really, it will depend on, what the nature of the work it is that we would be doing. I mean, for example, if we're going to build an aircraft, we'll need airfields. So who has the airfields available? If we're going to build missiles, we'll need test ranges like you've got. And so it really depends on, what the capability is that we're going to build as to where we might look to invest with partners in the future. But, it's, as you say, all states are competing. It is a very healthy environment right now, and all states are developing aerospace and defense policies to support the build-up of this capability in their states. And so I think, that will kind of come into it as well. What's your policy like versus somebody else's in order to encourage investment and to encourage companies to come and put their headquarters there?
Thank you. Mr. Norona, since we are sitting in TiEcon and celebrating entrepreneurship, what are the key challenges that a startup would face starting a new venture in aerospace and defense sector, particularly in this context in India? What do you feel are the main challenges?
See, challenges, I think, I have helped in Goa at least to set up about 38 different startups there. There are challenges of all types. But like I said, when I spoke earlier, that the main thing would be setting up the ecosystem around such a area of defense. That unless you have organizations like DRDO who allow their labs, or maybe the higher institutes like IITs allow their labs to be used by innovators, that challenge could be overcome. But otherwise, right now, it's very virgin. There's hardly any space available for these innovators to work there.
So thank you, both the panelists. I think we have a great emerging story in the defense sector, which is there in India. And I think TiEcon can actually encourage and motivate a lot of startups to participate in this emerging story in the defense sector in India. And as I said, and as Mr. Straw and Norona was pointing out, Government of India has already taken a lot of steps to create the kind of ecosystem, to create the kind of business-friendly environment, particularly for the defense industry. It takes time to calibrate the policies to suit the needs of to suit the needs of the industry. But I think the work is on, and very shortly we would find a lot of investments coming up in India in the defense sector. Thank you.